All right. Before we move on to talking about all the opinion, I will have a quick recap with you about materiality and the evaluation of misstatements. And in this part, you need to understand the materiality of each question. This is important for you to determine whether you are going to qualify the your client or not, and what type of opinion you are going to make depends on the misstatement in the question, whether it is above or below the materiality level. So you need to understand the materiality. And sometimes the question will tell you directly what is the materiality for that particular question, but sometimes you may need to create that by yourself. For example, you will need to use a certain benchmark in the question to determine something whether it is material or not. It is good if the question already gives you a materiality. If not, you will have to make an assumption sometime and use the given financial details to calculate the materiality and say whether something is material or not. And most of the time in the examination, they will use the word materiality level. They will just tells you the materiality is like $1 million, something like that, or $10,000. It gives you a materiality. But sometimes you will use the word performance materiality. You will sometimes you just say the word materiality. But most of the time in the question, the materiality we are talking about is mostly performance materiality. And of course, if it specifically use this word, it must be performance materiality. But if generally you just say materiality, and you can just directly use the amount as the bench as the threshold for you to determine the opinion or whether something is how you're going to deal with a certain misstatement. What are you going to do with it? And because on this one, it is some on this we call it overall materiality or generally the materiality level in the question as something that will affect the economic decision of the user. So users is one of the important persons inside a question. So if something is going to affect the decision, obviously it's material to us, and you need to deal with it specifically. Okay, and I'm not going into details on other things. You can read it by yourself. And most important part I want to talk about is here. Sometimes if the question already gives you certain financial information, the balance sheet and P&L was being given in the question, you can determine the materiality by yourself. Most of the time, if the question is a profit-making company, you can directly just pick the profit and then use 5% as the benchmark. Of course, I'm not talking a question that is testing your materiality. If the whole question is about materiality, you will deal with it in a different manner. Because today my topic is focusing on the opinion, so generally I just want to give you a recap on how to pick a correct benchmark direct in a question. If the question actually didn't give you a materiality, so you will use profit before tax and just use 5%. If something is higher than 5% of the profit for the year, you can say it is material. If it is below that, then it will be less. It will be not material enough. Of course, there will be circumstances that you probably will use total expenses or total asset or net asset. It depends on the items in your question. If it is a class of transaction question, for example, if it is related to revenue related or sales related, then using profit before tax should be good enough. But sometimes if the item is maybe testing on PPE or inventory, then you may want to use asset. Asset is probably more relevant things. And if the question really didn't give you a materiality, you can sometimes you can pick both, because your examiner will likely make it super material enough for you. So if you pick an item, your examiner wants you to say this is material, the amount of the item will likely be larger than 5% of the profit before tax and also larger than 0.5% of the total asset or the total expenses. It will be like, oh, no matter how you look at it, that item is material. Then there is no argument for you to say it is immaterial, so you don't need to do anything about it, or maybe do less thing about that item. So your examiner If they want you to treat it as a material item, they will not give you a ground to argue about it. So you need to pay attention about this. And here in the gray boxes, you can see some hints, some consideration I give you to look for case facts in the question to support your use of this benchmark. If you see this situation here in the examination, it is some hints your examiner gives you to pick the correct benchmark for that particular question. So you should pay attention and this, and you see I all put the focus on the user. You can just say the user likely to put emphasis on something because the situation or the company is being set up in certain way, or here is all the things that I gives you. You can put it in your answer when you pick the correct benchmark. All right. So the important things for today is to look at this table here is about the level of the misstatement. Obviously, if the misstatement is at this level, it is way higher than overall materiality, and if you say most of the time, if it is above performance or materiality, we will already say this is a misstatement that we need to correct it, because most of the time you will need to accumulate the misstatement and see whether all the misstatement add together is above the overall materiality. There is no arguable point in here if the amount is over overall materiality. It is in this part you need to pay more attention, because here you can directly give a modified opinion, but in this part most of the time, or I would say if I'm the examiner and I create a question, I will put the items in here because it gives you much more consideration, and in your answer there is much more things for you to put in your answer. Remember, the opinion in your answer most of the time it doesn't matter whether you are or are not to give the modified or qualified opinion. Is not the main matter, because if you say I'm going to give a qualified opinion, give reason, probably 1 or 2 marks. If you give a correct opinion, it's the explanation of why you are going to give that particular opinion is what you're going to, where you're going to get your marks. So you need to discuss correctly. For example, if something is being corrected, what is the consequence? And if that something is not corrected, it should be accumulated, and if it is not reduced to below overall materiality, you will still give a modified opinion. So sometimes in the question there is more than one misstatement. Each individual of them is like less than overall materiality, but for the 2 misstatements adding together is still above the overall materiality, then you will have to give a modified opinion. So there is much more consideration for you to put in here, and sometimes the question will give you items like offsetting each other. One is overstating the revenue and the other one is offsetting the revenue. Then what are you going to do with it? You will need to say that you need to accumulate together and see the effect. But of course, most of the time, you will suggest the client to make an adjustment, even if the amount is lower than overall materiality. It is because your client refused to do so, then you check whether the accumulated misstatement is above the materiality or not, then you will or will not give a modified opinion. So most of the time, if you come across the misstatement in your answer, always suggest your client to make an adjustment first. When the misstatement is above the clear trivial level, your answer will always be suggesting the client to amend it. Don't say it is below overall materiality, so we don't have to ask the client to do anything. The client just leave it be, something like that. We never say that. Okay, we just assume whether the question always assume the client is going to correct it or assume the client not going to correct it. Then what is your response as an auditor? It is a question structure, so you need to pay attention on this. Okay, and less circumstances, or I should say less chance that a misstatement is lower than clear trivial level, because if it is lower clear trivial level, it is inconsequential, no impact on your opinion. That basically nothing you need to do. You don't even need to accumulate it here. So less chances the misstatement will be ended. If a question have multiple misstatement, maybe one of it is above overall materiality, one of us is here, and then one of it is in this level, then your answer will be much more fruitful. You need to deal with each misstatement separately, and probably three misstatements and in part A, part B, part C of the same question, and then it will your answer will be a little bit different in this case. Okay, so remember here when we are going to talk about all the opinion in a minute, but the misstatements is the only thing that is going to affect your decision or the opinion. But I need to remind you one thing first. For you to consider an audit opinion, any effect on your audit opinion, the misstatement has to be material first. If it is an immaterial misstatement, most of the time in an exam question, it will not affect opinion. We will cover that in a minute when we move on to talking about audit opinion. Okay, so this is the quick recap I want to do with you for materiality and evaluation of misstatement. And please read through my notes and make sure you understand how we're going the relationship between materiality and misstatement. You have to be clear in your head before you go into the examination hall. Do not just like go into examination and then go to the page and then look at what you need to do. No, you need to make sure you already know how to deal with it before you go into the examination hall. All right, this open book examination is not for you. Do not have time for you to check your knowledge again during the examination. You have to already know how to deal with it and then plan your answer and write it down in your answer booklet. Okay, so this is it for the quick recap for this part. Okay, so now we're going to the last part of this seminar regarding the audit opinion. First of all, before we go to talking what type of opinion giving or what are the consideration, I must remind you the first things first. You can see from the definition of HKSA 700, it is our duties or responsibility to form an opinion regarding whether the financial statement gives a true and fair view or not. And if the financial statement gives a true and fair view, we should be issuing a unmodified auditor's report. And therefore, I want to remind you one thing. The main objectives of our work of doing an audit, performing an audit on our client's financial statement, the ultimate aim, you can remind that, is that we actually do want to give an unmodified opinion. We want to give an unmodified report. Our aim is not to qualify our client. That's why we have to continue to do so many audit procedures in order to obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence that the financial statement is actually true and fair. And that's why we suggest our client to adjust their financial statement if there's a possibility, there's a minor or even a immaterial misstatement. We still want our client to amend the financial statement, because our aim is to get an unmodified audit report on a true and fair financial statement. That is our ultimate goal. Okay, especially in this examination. Okay, I don't care what's in real life, whether if you are working in the audit industry, do you want or do you want to qualify your client or not? I don't care about that. But at least in this examination, or if you just look at the objectives of the auditing standard or how we structure our audit work, our main aim is to get a true and fair real financial statement. All right, you have to bear that in mind, because you guys in the examination, like 80% of you guys, when they see a misstatement, when they see a situation that involves maybe fraud or some kind of misappropriation of asset or manipulation by the management, you want to qualify the report. Your first answer, you guys, the first answer immediately put in your answer book is that, okay, I'm giving a qualified opinion, full stop. Stop doing that. I always ask you, when it comes to audit or opinion, do not jump into conclusion, because most of the time you are not going to give a qualified opinion in the examination. Okay, unless the question is so clear that there is a misstatement that is material and pervasive enough for you to give a modified or even adverse or disclaimer of opinion. You have to reduce your urge to jump to conclusion. And again, as I just mentioned, it is the discussion of what type of opinion should be given in the question is where you are going to get marks. Okay, so bear in mind this part first. And actually, SA 700 is easy because it is talking about just giving an unmodified audit opinion. And what makes you confusing is the part regarding 705 here, because in this part you are going to pick the correct audit opinion according to the case facts or according to the audit work you have done, the audit evidence you have on hand to do this. And in the examination, most of the time you will see the word assuming something, or your examiner assumes something, or in the question, assume you didn't get something, assume something is failed, assume your audit procedures did not get the results that you want. What will happen or what you will do. Okay, and sometimes it's like assuming the client correct the financial statement and assuming the client not correct the financial statement. Part A and part B of the question is to ask you what is your opinion, or how will it impact on your audit work, how will it impact on your audit opinion, a question something like that. So you need to know where are you in the situation. After all the case fair, all the audit procedures that you suggest, you ultimately still you need to go back to the case fair and the question and read the details carefully to help you determine where to go. And here you can see under 705, there are two options for you here when you should modify your opinion. Two options. The first one is not free from material misstatement. It means there are material misstatement inside the financial statement. But for you to get this, there's one very important thing. You must have sufficient appropriate audit evidence to say there is something wrong. The first option here, there is something wrong. There are at least take away the word material first, at least there are some sort of misstatement within the financial statement, and then you need to consider whether those misstatements are material or not. If they are material and you have sufficient appropriate evidence to prove that, then you will pick the first option here. It is not free from material misstatement, and this is what I call the route number one. Route 1, you can pick the first route if there are material misstatement. Therefore, for the second option here, you see the keywords in the auditing center itself is unable to obtain sufficient audit evidence. See, it links back to the part on audit evidence, and now we're talking unable to obtain. So here, first route number 1, you obtain sufficient audit evidence. But for route number 2, which are referring to the second option here, is that you are not able to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence on something. It can be the whole financial statement, or it can only be a small part of the financial statement, or one particular financial statement caption, or maybe one disclosure in the financial statement. It can be anything for both of them. So you need to pick the correct route first. This is determined by the case facts, whether you have or have not obtained enough or sufficient appropriate audit evidence. Determine which is your route here. And the route will determine what types of audit opinion you are going to give. So, no matter what is the issue in the question, the first thing after you read the case, if the question is asking you for your what is the opinion you are going to give, or whether the issue with the issue or disaster in the question, how will it affect your consideration on the audit opinion, how will it affect your audit partner's decision on the opinion. If the question is structured like that, first of all, you must pick the right route first. It determines by whether there is sufficient appropriate audit evidence or not. And in this case, you can see this part is what we call a limitation of scope. Limitation of scope is that you have certain limitation. Most of the time, if you see in the case facts that there are something you are not able to do, there are some kinds of audit procedures you are not able to perform, there are some places you cannot visit to perform a certain audit procedure, or there are circumstances that your client forbidden you to do something, If you see that in the case facts, most of the time you are going on route number 2. There are something you cannot do, or fail to obtain something, or fail to get the evidence on something. This is the part whether you cannot obtain sufficient and appropriate all the evidence because of the circumstances or because of your client don't want you to do something. You have failed to perform something. But for you to go into route 1, you must already been able to obtain all the evidence you need. You are going to confirm that there are a misstatement inside the financial statement and that your client refused to make an adjustment. Remember, the very key point in route number 1 is that your client do not agree with you on something. You say something which is according to accounting standard, according to auditing standard, according to rules and laws and regulation, whatever company ordinance or whatever rules, code of ethics, anything. That's if you check the client is doing something not according to those laws and regulation and standard, and then your client refuse to admit it or refuse to make an adjustment accordingly, it is called a disagreement. You must be arguing something with your client. You must have a disagreement first before you pick route number 1. Route number 2 does not necessarily have the agreement. Of course, the disagreement is that you want to perform a certain procedure. For example, I want to send confirmation, but the client do not agree me to do so. I want to visit the client's factory, visit the client's warehouses. The client refused me to do so. Okay, that is just a limitation of scope. It is not technically a disagreement because you cannot visit those places. You have no evidence to propose an adjustment for with your client. Yes, because the client disagree with your procedures. Okay, here is your client disagreeing you to perform certain procedure. Is technically not a disagreement. It is your client forbidding you to perform your audit work. There is a limitation on your ability to perform your audit work and audit procedures. This is not the same as the disagreement we are talking about here. The disagreement here again is that you confirm there are something material misstatement. You want the client to make an adjustment or change something. It is not correct. You already have confirmation on that, and your client disagree with you on or don't want to obey your suggestion, don't want to follow on your suggestion to make an adjustment. Here is route number 1. You must be able to tell the difference between this. Most of the time it is when sometimes you guys just think, okay, no matter what the client disagree with me on something, I will pick route number 1. Not necessarily. Remember, here the key point between route 1 and route 2 is still on whether you have sufficient, appropriate, or the evidence to prove there is or is not a misstatement. Okay, so here this is very important. And then you go into the opinion part. There are technically 4 opinions you can give in your auditor's report. First of all, I call it, the first one is qualified opinion. No matter it is disagreement or limitation of scope, it is called qualified opinion, and technically we call it except for here, because on the first level here it is only part of the financial statement having a problem, and except for that part that have problem, other part is okay. Other part still gives a true and fair will, and other part still gives a true and fair will. All right, so you need to understand both of them are called qualified opinion, and this is called except for disagreement. This is called except for limitation of scope. This is how we mentioned it. You can use this word in examination. This is the name you are going to put in the answer. If the question asks you what types of opinion you are going to give, you should say qualified opinion, under which is an except for disagreement, which you have sufficient appropriate evidence there is a material misstatement in the situation. So for this is what I call the first level of opinion. This is a lower level. The financial statement still, most of it still gives a true and fair will Only a small part of it is not. And that part is material but not pervasive. This is the key word. If you are going to give this opinion, this keyword must appear in your answer. You must say the misstatement is material but not pervasive. Therefore, you give a qualified except for opinion. No matter it is on route 1 or route 2, you must say it is material but not pervasive first before you give a qualified opinion. If you miss this word, technically you are wrong. Even if you get the correct opinion, you didn't say why. This is why, and the why is fixed. There's nothing for you to change. And most of the time, the question already tells you only a small part of one financial statement caption having a problem. Most of the time, you are giving a qualified opinion. All right, and then we move on to the second level. How do we move from level 1 to level 2, or the ultimate level of opinion? Is that the misstatement or the effect of the matter or the problem in the case is both material and pervasive. So, if you want to give an adverse opinion or a disclaimer of opinion in the examination, the situation, the problem, the issue must be material and pervasive. If the question didn't say so, and according to the circumstances in the question, you think it is material and pervasive, before you give this opinion, again, you must put these keywords in your answer. You must say something is material and pervasive. Therefore, you're going to give an adverse opinion if you are on route number 1. If you are on route number 2, you will say something is material and pervasive. Therefore, I'm going to give a disclaimer of opinion. Remember that. I can't stop reminding you, because no matter how many times I say, you guys, when you do the mock paper, when there's a question or not the opinion, you guys, like 80-90% of you jump immediately to talk about I'm giving an adverse opinion. And okay, but you have to say it is material and pervasive. This word is not important. Rather, this is the more important keyword you should put in the answer. All right, you will get marks by just saying this. And most of the time in the question, your examiner will give the assumption that something is pervasive or not, because material and pervasive, material probably is not necessary a judgment, because you have a materiality set in the question. If the question already gives you a materiality, if it is higher, then it is material. If it is lower than the materiality level, then it is not material. But for whether something is pervasive or not, technically is a judgment. And in the examination, how do you make a judgment? Is that you make an assumption that it is not pervasive or pervasive, in order to determine what is the level of opinion you are going to give, whether you are still on level 1, which is a qualified opinion, or you move on to level 2. And here, look at this. You see I highlight this in red and I highlight this in yellow. See? Let's be clear about something. Just now I tell you our aim is to make sure the financial statement actually is true and fair, so that we can give an unmodified opinion. Correct? That's HKSA 700. And even now we are in 705. 705 specifically is for modified opinion, right? And you see here, in the 4 opinion you can give, only one of them says the financial statement do not give a true and fair view. The other 3 options, all of both here is saying that the financial statement gives a true and fair view except for something. And the last one here, actually we are not able to express an opinion. So technically we did not say the financial statement is not true and fair. It is because the limitation of scope is so huge that the effect is material and pervasive, which leads us to be unable to give any opinion. So we say we does not express an opinion on the financial statement. Okay, so this is like saying no comment. We have no comment on the financial statement, okay, because we are not able to perform our work appropriately. We do not have sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. That goes into here. And that is only one chance is that we have so concrete audit evidence to say that the financial statement overall is not giving a true and fair view. Most of the time, for this situation to happen, is for the going concern problem. The client is not able to continue its business normally in the next 12 months, so they have a going concern problem, but they still using going concern basis in their financial statement, which make the whole financial statement misleading. Therefore, it is material and pervasive because the whole financial statement do not give a true and fair view because the basis of preparation of the financial statement is incorrect. Then you will give an adverse opinion. And most of the time in the examination, I can tell you, unless this is a going concern problem, that your client is using a wrong basis and refuse to correct it, you will get an adverse opinion. It's like 90% of the other time is qualified opinion. Okay, and there is a seldom chance you will give a disclaimer of opinion examination. So again, do not jump into the conclusion and give an adverse opinion or disclaimer of opinion without really talking about the whole thinking process in your answer. In your answer, you must have these keywords and use case facts to support your analysis and then to pick a correct opinion. Okay, just bear in mind, we want the financial statement to be true and fair as much as possible. So you always suggest your client to make an adjustment first and then try to persuade them that something is incorrect, okay? Or you need to persuade them to allow us to perform certain other procedures. This is your what you put in your answer. If your client refuse you to something, the first answer you should say, what do you do? When the question asks you what should you do, the client refuse to let you do something. Your answer is like talks to the management again to explain to them the importance of letting us to perform a certain procedure, or you go to those charged with governance and communicate to them the problem with management in order to allow you to perform certain audit procedure or to check something. This is your aim, and you have to have this in your head, knowing what is your ultimate goal. Then your answer will follow this flow all the time. And again, remember, you do not want to give an adverse or disclaimer of opinion in the examination because most of the time it is wrong. Seriously. Okay? You need to talk about the thinking process based on the facts. And here I give the definition of pervasiveness. In the examination, you will not be asked to write this. If the question really asks you what is pervasive, what is meant by pervasive, then it is a definition question that probably worth 1 or 2 marks. You can come and copy the answer, but most of the time you will not see it. And most of the time, if it is just related to one financial statement caption or one disclosure item, then it will be a qualified opinion. Except in a situation that that item like accounts for like 90% of the total asset or the 90% of the profit, then probably it will go into adverse. But most of the time in the examination it will not. And I hopefully most of the time the question will tell you it is pervasive or not. All right, so be careful, and if you practice more past paper enough, you should be able to tell this. All right, so this is the part where I remind you the how you pick and correct opinion. Of course, there are other section in this chapter here that talks about other things in the auditor's report, because the chapter name is called auditor's report. Audit opinion is just a very small part of the whole auditor's report. There are a lot of things that can be examined in this chapter. So take your time to understand the rest. And but today my main focus is on audit opinion. Okay. Now we will move on to talking about a passive Q&A. Okay, so let's move on to a question and answer for a question regarding audit opinion. This is again from December 2024. This is a section B question. And first of all, before we go into a section B question, you need to be careful. The information in section B for each question is actually quite limited. There's not a lot of information. Like section A, for example, you will not have a whole financial statement being provided to you. Therefore, in this case, you have to be able to make up your mind with the little information in this question. So let's go into the question first. And let's go from the top for this question. And the industry here is, you see, it is an amusement park with a variety of attraction. So it established a rule that this company is an industry, that the PPE is extremely important. This is the first hint from the question. It didn't give you anything. Okay, it's just said it is an amusement park. But with that, you already need to know if it talks about PPE, it is important to this specific company because this is an amusement park. You need to know the industry in the question, and especially in section B. That's it. That's the hint for you in section B. Anyway, let's look at the requirement first. Here, we have identified the issue. Not much information. It's just said we have issue that may impact the true and fair will. So something related to the opinion here, and the question is straightforward. Didn't say anything else, just asked you to advise and explain the appropriate auditor's opinion. So it didn't give you anything about whether you're arguing with the client whatsoever. It just directly asked you for audit opinion from the requirement here. So you know this question is talking about how to give an audit opinion. And remember, as I reminded you, do not jump into conclusion. Thinks about it. It may be a question of a modified opinion or maybe a question for qualified opinion. You don't know that yet. For just here, just stop yourself. All right. And for this question, it already gives you a materiality, $5 million here. And as I mentioned, when we have a recap on the materiality sometimes in the question is not that important because if your examiner wants you to give a qualified opinion in the question, there will be no doubt this is like extremely material. So let's dig into the information. For example, first part here, you can see the two figures. There's only two figures in the first part, which is 75 million and 25 million. No matter how you make it, 75 minus 25 or plus 25 whatsoever, okay, the answer is it is material. There's no doubt. You see the figures given. You already don't have to think whether it is material or not. It must be material. We must be talking about something material. And you see here it's 30 million. Okay, the 30 millions and the 15 minutes. So 30 minutes and 15 minutes, the difference is 15 minutes. It's way higher than the materiality level already. So you don't need to argue anything in this question is material or not already. Without even looking at the facts. I'm serious. You just look at the figures. You know what your examiner is trying to do. So most likely, if the issue is not corrected or something wrong in it, because this question immediately asks you for appropriate audit opinion. So if the problem here is not resolved, you are likely to be able to give a at least qualified opinion. Whether or not we will go to level 2, we still need to read about the facts. So here, it didn't say much. The problem here is say it owns PPE, which is a material component of a statement of financial position. It didn't give you any information. You don't know the total assets. You don't know the revenue. You don't know the profit. You don't know nothing in this question. You just know the industry, amusement park. So of course, PPE is as a material component. So your examiner gives you the hints here. And when you go into here, it talks about a lot of things, post-pandemic, pre-pandemic, whatever. This is not important at all. The important part is that there is a 75 million of PPE included a reversal of impairment. So they reverse it. And then the keywords here is this. However, you need to look for this. What actually happened doesn't matter. You want to know what is the problem here, especially when a question asks you for audit opinion. You need to go to the end to find what is the main problem. What are we trying to do? For giving an opinion, I already told you the first thing you must determine from the problem here is to whether it is root 1 or root number 2. You have to pick a root first. then you go with the opinion. If you are unable to determine which route, there's a high chance that you go wrong, because there's 4 opinion you can pick and 1 from each route. So technically, if it is like only 25% chances for you to pick the correct opinion, if let's say it's A, B, C, D, 4 choices. So 25%, if you just like guess, it's only 25% chance, which is so low. You need 50% chance, 50% of the marks to pass examination, right? So you must first make sure you pick the correct word first. And therefore, what is the keywords here? When you look at it, like, was unable, but it is not talking about you. It's not talking about the auditor. It's talking about your client unable to explain and provide evidence to support the assumption regarding the reversal of the impairment. So the important thing is regarding the assessment of the fair value or the value of the PPE, which support the reversal of the impairment in this case. So now you may be at a point that, okay, what is the accounting treatment for PPE? What is the accounting treatment for impairment of asset? What is the accounting treatment of the reversal of impairment? You have a lot of debit and credit whatsoever going on in your head now, right? And stop. You do not need to care about the accounting treatment. This is module 13. You just need to know this is a reversal of impairment. That is it. Alright? And the problem here, already given to you, is that you are unable to get evidence. The client don't know what they're doing. But it is because this word, the client was unable to provide you with anything. So you have nothing to check on. You do not have anything to check on because you are not an expert in the amusement park attraction. You do not know how much the roller coaster can cost. You do not know that your client has to provide you with the information. It's not like owning a commercial building in Central, right? You have market value. You can have a value to property value to value that property. You can still get evidence from somewhere else, but this is an amusement park. There's no reasonable person or reasonable value that can guess how much a roller coaster will cost you, right? So this is the PV here. This is a very specific problem. So, and if you don't think about that, believe me, you don't know about the amusement park. You didn't catch this. You just know this is a PPE material, reversal amount material. That's enough. And the question already tells you unable to provide evidence. So you can immediately make an assumption that you are unable to obtain audit evidence in this case. So immediately you should go to this one, is route number 2. You need to make a determination immediately right after you look at this. Because of these 2 words here, this is route 2. This is section B. You need to do it that quick. There's no spare time for you to study the materials. Just pick the key things. When you practice past paper, this is what you need to do. Don't spend time like drill into that. Find out what is the keywords here. What in the question leads you to the answer. Of course, the first time you try a past paper, you probably get it wrong. But after you read the answer, you need to go back to the question and see why the answer eventually is route 2. I'm telling you, the answer is route 2 because of this. If you see this in examination, you say we are unable to obtain evidence. Because the keywords here is unable to get evidence. The question says it, or even if the question didn't say it, you can make such assumption by yourself. You can say, because they are unable to why, as a auditor, we are also unable to obtain. Therefore, I pick route number 2. The problem is here. It's the 3 star. It is the opinion that you are going to give, right? It's either route 1 or route 2. But the important part to get the marks is to explain it. So if you can say you are unable to get the audit evidence, so you will pick route number 2. And then this is the difficult part. This part A is the difficult part. You may probably think about except for PPE because the client do not want to adjust it, whatever. Don't say those things. It didn't say
what happened with the client. There's no argument in here. The question just tells you unable to get evidence. So you go with would number 2. It's that simple. If you know what you are doing, this examination is extremely easy and straightforward. That's it. And for part B, it's talking about some kind of a bond and linked to the interest rate. It mentions something Hong Kong Monetary Authority is changing the interest rate. It jumps into like an economic and political whatever kind of problem. It's same specs. Don't worry. Okay? And it talks about fair value full P&L, financial instrument, financial asset is one of the most difficult topic in module 11. It's one of the hardest topic you have to understand for financial instrument, right? A lot of students are afraid of financial instrument, afraid of deferred tax question. Again, go back here. We are at module 13. It doesn't matter. Even if you don't know anything about module 11, you haven't taken module 11 exam, whatever, you haven't studied in accounting, it doesn't matter. It is in the word. It said it is fair value full P&L. You know financial asset at fair value, right? It said financial asset at fair value. And it said the client recorded at cost 30 million. And the fair value now is 15 million. So you know the client is not recording it according to what's requirement of fair value full P&L, right? They are recording at cost and the difference is 15 million. So you can immediately say the client is not following the relevant HKFRS. If the client is not following the requirement of law and regulation, I tell you, it is root number 1 because in the accounting standard it says it has to be fair value and the fair value is already there. Alright? The fair value is already there and it tells you the interest rate of the market will affect the value of this bond. So it is very clear that you are being able to calculate the fair value on this easily because it is according to market interest rate being announced by the Hong Kong Monetary Authority. It's the public information. So there's no argument here. Everything in here is pointing wood number 1, especially they are recording it at cost and not fair value. Of course, it is better if you have basic understanding of most of the accounting standard, then you can immediately tell this is a deviation from accounting standard. You can say this is root number 1. Alright? So, what is the opinion then? Both of the question here, it didn't really say much, right? It only gives you $5 million, but you cannot tell whether it is pervasive or not, right? So, you need to make an assumption, and I can tell you, most of the time, if it is related to one of the financial statement caption only, you should pick qualified opinion. So, level 1, root 2, level 1, qualified opinion. Root 1, level 1, qualified opinion. So, both of this question, if you say it is material, of course it is material, but not pervasive, then both answer can point to a qualified opinion. That is it. That's it for you in this examination. You get the correct opinion. Once you pick the root material and you say it's only related to one financial statement caption, so it's likely not pervasive, or you can assume it's not pervasive, you will give a qualified opinion in both cases. Alright? And now you may ask, what if I want to give the second level here? Because Jackie, you say we can make an assumption. Can we just make an assumption then it is pervasive? Then we will give a disclaimer of opinion or even an adverse opinion. Can we do that? Actually, yes, but it depends on the situation. For example, here, in this part, probably no. It's hard for you to justify a 15 million deviation on the fair value of one item, which is just a bond. In this case, that this is pervasive. It's hard because this is only one item, so this is hard. But this one, actually, if you know what you are doing, if you give a level 2 opinion, meaning going to disclaimer opinion in this part, you can justify that because the case facts is pointing to you that the PPE is a material component in the whole statement financial position. So if you do it properly, you can give a pervasive assumption and say this is a disclaimer opinion. But if you didn't, even if you didn't listen to anything I said, just follow the normal rule. One financial statement caption, qualified opinion. You still get all the marks in this question. So let's go into the answer, and I will explain to you more in details. First of all, you see part A, it gives you two options. Option 1 is disclaimer, option 2 is qualified. So ignore option 1. If you follow what I said, just immediately go give a qualified opinion for first part, you get the marks. And here, part B, qualified opinion, route number 1. You see in the suggested answer, you didn't even say the word whether it is disagreement or limitation of scope. You just say qualified opinion. So technically, you don't have to say that. But my suggestion that is you say, you put in the word except for limitation of scope or except for disagreement inside the inside your answer is a little bit better. But anyway, both of the question is qualified opinion. But I want to point you to something. You see here, he has a whole paragraph talking about 705. It goes to route number 1, have obtained sufficient appropriate evidence. So A here is my route 1. B is route 2. Remember, in the examination, you do not need to do this. You do not need to copy this whole paragraph and the definition. Because this is a 4 marks and 3 mark question, you do not waste time to put down the definition. You just goes into the answer. And the purpose for having this paragraph here, you see 705 being mentioned here, both route 1 and route 2. And here again, 705 being mentioned, but here just mention route number 2, unable to obtain all the evidence if you read it. So the reason here is because you want to give a disclaimer of opinion. And here, the first part is unnecessary because we are focusing on unable to obtain all the evidence anyway. Alright, so if you're focusing on the second part, you can ignore the first part. But the most important words that in this 2 paragraphs first is this. You see, here just mention material and pervasive because the opinion is disclaimer. Here, it only mentioned material but not pervasive. It didn't say anything about material and pervasive because the answer is going for qualified opinion. You see how important this word is. As I said, the opinion itself is not important. I need you to have this material but not pervasive or material and pervasive in your answer. You must be able to do that. And therefore, here you can see there's case facts here. What happened here? Was unable to access, and so eventually it was we cannot conclude it was not free from material misstatement. And here, it's the same. This is exactly the same case facts you copy from the question, right? So what is the difference for option 1 and option 2? You see, it's the assumption here. See, the possible impact would be on only one financial statement caption, which is property, plant, and equipment, and its related P&L. And therefore, your conclusion, you make this assumption, and the conclusion is material but not pervasive. This is basing on case facts, your assumption or your analysis of this case fact saying that it is material but not pervasive, so you give a qualified opinion. Up here, it is the same. You see, it starts with the same sentence, the same sentence. The amusement part is highly capital intensive, but it is material. Of course, it's material. And the description of the assumptions changes here. It changed. It changed to could have a consequential effect. And everything will be affected. You see the surplus, the estimate of changes, equity, change in cash flow, related disclosure, net asset, whatever, blah, 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 blah. I say a lot of things in the financial statement may be affected by this problem. Therefore, it is likely pervasive. So, material and pervasive. So, route number 2, level 2, disclaimer. See? This is, sometimes I always say, this is just an English test. Your answer is determined by how you describe the problem. In this case, if you write with your pen saying that it impacts a lot of things, therefore level 2 disclaimer. It is because this is a section B question without a lot of information about the company. Therefore, you can do something like this. If I remove this question to section A, you have the financial statements, you have the much more information from the whole case, then your answer may change. But in section B, however, it is quite open-ended. It depends on how you describe the situation because the question actually did not give you much information. You make the assumption, pick the correct word, you get the answer. And for part B, it's straightforward. Nothing here, again, you don't need to say this. Okay, it's waste of time. This whole paragraph, if you copy it in your answer booklet, is probably a whole page. If your writing is like really large or something, you probably need a page and a half in your answer booklet to copy this paragraph. It's waste of time. Directly say, answer the question. Qualified opinion is proposed that why the directors have not marked the listed bond securities to fair value. It departure from HKFRS 13 fair value measurements. You may argue, is it the correct accounting standard, or should we talk about financial asset one, or should we use financial or fair value measurement? Remember, again, this is not module 11. You don't even need to name the FRS number. You just say it is not in accordance with the applicable HKFRS. That's it. You don't even need to know HKFRS 13 is fair value measurement. You don't. This is not module 11. You just say it departure from HKFRS. Full stop. You can stop here. Okay. So technically, you don't need this part at the end. You don't need. You just full stop here. HKFRS. That's it. And then you say this is case fact, copying against a case fact. But eventually, the important thing, no matter what the case fact, it doesn't matter. Just put it in the examination. It is material but not pervasive. All right. This is how you're going to give the opinion. Once you determine if it is root 1 or root 2, the answer is easy and straightforward. It depends on how you describe it. And remember, you must have these two words in your answer, material and pervasive. It must be material. If it is not material, you will not be giving a qualified opinion. And whether it is pervasive or not depends on the case facts and how you describe it most of the time. Make the correct assumption. No matter you go option 1 or option 2, you still get the same kind of marks. Just that you need to read everything carefully, know what you are doing, pinpoint the question correctly, and then plan your answer accordingly. All right. So this is it for my seminar today. I hope I will see you in my class. If you really want to know more about the other topics and how to deal with a lot of situation, especially your how to interpret the question. Really, really remember when you study past paper, you need to know how to interpret the question and pinpoint the topics and answer you need to put in your answer book. That's the key point for this examination. Remember, this examination is extremely simple and straightforward. And now, this examination, the passing rate move, I don't know why, since moved to the module 13, it comes from a lowest passing rate to the highest passing rate module. So it's easier now in the module 13 era. In the past, it's module C, right? Now it's called module 13. And in module 13, the passing rate is much higher. So the question actually direction change a little bit. It's easier now when you read the question. If you know how to interpret the question, all the answer is actually inside the question already. So let's make sure you understand what you are doing. And I wish you all luck in the examination. All right. Thank you.